All right, so for the second video in the Intro to Tarot series, you'll see that we have the Magician, the second card in the traditional lineup of the Major Arcana, which may seem kind of strange since you'll see the number 1 on most of them, pretty much all of them. But if you catch the previous video, the one on the Fool, which I can link in the description here, you'll see why. Now, as far as the Magician goes, like the Fool, it has to do with beginnings. Now, if we want to think of the succession or progression of the first few cards in the Major Arcana, let's think about a seed for a moment. Maybe one that you acquire at a store. The Fool, full of potential, seems like the seed that you buy in a package, and you haven't even opened the package yet. Full of potential. You might get a great plant out of a particular seed, but you don't know yet. You haven't really done anything with it. So really kind of like Schrodinger's cat, right? Until you find out, it holds two potentials. The seed may turn into a dud, and it may turn into a great harvest, but you don't know yet because you haven't even opened it. Moving into the Magician, now we've torn open the package and we've dropped it in the ground. And we've watered it. It has what it needs to meet its potential. Now, other factors will come into play, of course, but the Magician has what he, or in some very rare instances, she, needs. And I say rare instances because I've seldom seen the Magician depicted as a female. Technically, I guess we don't know for sure in the Santa Muerte Tarot here because, well, skeletons, an anthropologist maybe could tell us, but the vast majority of them have been depicted in the masculine form. So the Magician has what he or she needs to accomplish whatever phase of life the cards refer to when he or she appears. Now, I do want to draw attention to the fact that two of the renditions, the Aleister Crowley Thoth and the Black Flame Tarot, opt to call the Magician the Magus. That has some significance in certain circles, in certain esoteric schools. The Magus has become a master and has created himself or herself anew from something prior. They've actively pursued and created themselves as a new person operating on a different level of being. So the potential for the Magician or the Magus, whichever you prefer, and excuse me, well, the Golden Dawn Tarot calls him the Magician, but then calls him also the Magus of Power. So we see the Magus 3 times in this particular grouping. Now, that just shows the potential, though, for what sort of work the Magician can represent, what sort of huge potential this can involve. So, as I mentioned, the Magician has stuff. The Magician has things. Not what he needs to finish his work or his journey or both. If he had all that, he probably wouldn't need to work on whatever he finds himself beginning. But he has what he needs to get started. And we'll actually see an interesting progression here. Now, this top row has some historical significance. The bottom ones I find interesting as novelty depictions, still very useful in a lot of ways. But these up top have some historical significance. So we go back to the 15th century with these first two, and we'll notice that indeed the magician does have things. He has tools on his table. It looks like perhaps tools for a game here. Maybe guess which cone the balls, which cone to find the balls under. This one he has a knife. It also appears that he has some dice. Moving into the 1800s, we have the Tarot de Marseille, where he has more stuff, but also sort of haphazardly scattered, and it looks like at least some of it having to do with a game. This reminds me very much of the trickster archetype, which we also see reflected in the Thoth Tarot with Hermes there, right? Or what looks an awful lot like Hermes. This shows not necessarily that we have to worry about a trickster, although we'll probably encounter one when we get into transition, when we get into, esoteric work. Tricksterish things begin to happen. And we often will cause that, actually. So we take on sort of a trickster quality. But as we move forward generally into the 1900s with the ever-popular Rider-Waite-Smith deck, well, now we see something. We see that his haphazard arrangement of tools and gaming implements have become 4 specific items. And these correspond to the 4 suits in the minor arcana. We have our sword, our cup, our wand, and our pentacle or pentagram or coin or disc, whichever you prefer. Now, we see that moving forward generally in several other depictions in the Thoth. Although hard to see from a distance, we do see a sword, a cup, a wand, and a pentacle. So even though more haphazardly arranged, maybe carrying back to that earlier tradition, we see those 4 elements. Also in the Black Flame Tarot, also in the Deviant Moon, and in the Golden Dawn, or the Hermetic Tarot. With exception on 2 of the newer depictions, the Nicoletta Sicoli and the Santa Muerte, where we see actually, it looks like a wand, but we don't see, and maybe what would pass as a cup, but we don't see specifically those other elements. So the vast majority, in short, of the newer depictions, the newer renditions of the magician will give a nod to the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and include the 4 elements. And that just goes back to the magician having what he needs to get started. The magician has acquired these things over time, which means he can use lessons, he can use equipment from the past to move forward and to apply in the present and toward his future progression. So while the magician has a lot to do with potential, it also has to do with looking at the past, not obsessing over the past, but looking at the past to see what it can teach us about where we want to go. I just want to mention a few details on some of these different depictions. The Rider-Waite-Smith, if you look closely at his belt, we don't see a belt, we see a snake. And to me, that gives a nod to his self-transformative potential, just as a snake sheds its skin, right? So through our work in the Magician card, we can become something new, or a new, better version of ourselves. In the Black Flame Tarot, we notice a lot of red. Now we see red as a kind of a standout color in this early depiction. We have him clothed in red, very similar here in the Rider-Waite-Smith. And we definitely see a red presence in the Santa Muerte. But the Black Flame, pretty much we've got red and black. Shades of red and black throughout the whole card. Bear in mind, red in tarot signifies an action-orientedness, a very verb context, if you will. It involves doing things. The magician won't make anything happen if he doesn't do. The alchemist may want to change things into gold, but if he doesn't go out and acquire the things and the knowledge to do it, he won't move beyond wanting, and our seed won't begin to germinate. So when we see this card, don't get self-assured saying, well, I have what I need. You have what you need to get started. Now you need to go to work. And I just want to draw attention also to the Nicoletta Ciccoli Tarot. Such a strange deck, such a beautiful deck. The woman who designed this did a phenomenal job. Couple things. We've got the birdcage with a red bird, so definitely giving a nod to the red in the others. But we also see our little girl, our little animal girl, if you look at her legs, removing a mask. A lot of the work that we do in the magician phase will involve, as I mentioned, self-transformation. That can involve freeing parts of ourselves, as if from a cage, and that also has to involve becoming self-aware, knowing ourselves. So while we have what we need to get started, we also have ourselves. We need to really dig in, get in there and figure out what works, what makes me me. I'll go back to one of my favorite adages. As within, so without. If the magician wants to change things in the world, he has to change things within himself. The transformation starts with you, and like a pebble dropped into a pond, the effects ripple outward. So while you've got your tools, and you want to set up your altar, and you want to do this and that, look within. Don't forget that. Absolutely fundamental need. So, a couple more quick things. As I mentioned, a lot of potential, very positive sounding card. It does have some negative potential as well. We already mentioned not getting self-assured. Don't dawdle. Magic takes time. You do not learn it overnight. You do not learn it overnight. And you won't transform yourself or succeed in these objectives rapidly, like a seed, right? It takes time, probably longer than a seed, that gives rise to a plant that'll bloom for a short period of time. This will take a while. So get started. Don't put it off. And again, don't forget, this will involve a lot of work. Magic involves a lot of work. To accomplish things involves preparation, performance, evaluation, redoing things. It takes time. So don't forget that. And yeah, that about sums it up for the magician. Remember, it requires a meaningful, aware relationship with yourself as well. So do some journaling, do some self-exploration, and use that as part of your magical process and preparation. Going to continue to make these. I want to get through all 78, so we got a ways to go. I hope you enjoy this. I hope this sheds some light on some different things about the magician that maybe you hadn't thought of before. If I missed something you find important, let me know in the comments. And if you have questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear those as well. Until next time, folks, keep transforming and have a beautiful day.